Hello, Tribesters. So today, for our expert-led conversation, I have the pleasure of welcoming back Susie Rucker. So some of you may have already had the chance to listen to Susie and my conversation from the series Nourish Your Body, where she introduces functional medicine and we talk all about the immune system. But for those of you who don't know her yet, and I say yet because I really recommend you listen to that episode, Susie is a qualified functional medicine practitioner, one of only 150 in the UK. Functional medicine, as a side note, is the idea of dealing with the root cause rather than treating a symptom. Susie and I can touch on that a little bit later when we chat. And Susie's had a very extensive career. She started as a nurse in London before moving to Africa and Asia, where she was inspired by the power of nutrition, trained in nutritional therapy, which then led her to functional medicine. So as ever, we could talk about a million things, but today we need to get focused, and we're going to be talking about healthy habits and how food affects your mood. And as Tommy, my husband and co-founder, says, it's definitely food for thought. Okay, Susie, so nice to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me back. It's very exciting to be with you.
We're going to make this a consistent thing. So let's just dive right in. When you think about this time of year, we're coming into February, what for you springs to mind?
I love the word you use, spring, because I think I've found myself in the last few weeks, and we are still in January, talking to my clients about spring. And I think in part we're talking about spring because it brings hope, new beginnings. For us in the Northern Hemisphere, light, warmth, because I think it's been bone cold. And of course, that can sometimes prevent better habits. So I think spring is a chance for change, springing into action, new energy, really reflected, particularly touch into nature, those new buds and new life. We already have lambs in the field opposite. So I think this, to me, it's hope. And I think, again, it's about change. And we're going to talk about habits today as well. But so I think it is a chance. And I think spring is so much easier than January. So anyone out there who's done dry January or started, on a good step of no alcohol or no sugar, but it's a tough month. It's a tough month to really, so I think going into spring and March, habit changing becomes easier.
Yeah, so as we talked about in January, the idea of instead of setting resolutions, which typically fail within a few weeks, if not a few days, we were really talking to our members about setting intentions for the long term. And actually, one of the things that we launched was a 30 days of well-being, and we ended up having over 200 people sign up for it. So we're just coming to the end of that actually now. And where I'll talk about then, okay, how are you going to go in and make sure that you set those intentions for now, February, March, April, the rest of the year. So thinking of that, and we've talked about a little bit about routine, and now let's talk about food, but what are your healthy habits?
I think touch on the routine, because I think this is the holiday us, and often comes with that perhaps different foods or different approach, if you're with alcohol, possibly Christmas, particularly Christmas, we look at alcohol and sugar being, part of coming together as families and friends. But I think routine is a big one. For me, exercise is a huge one, whether it's getting outside into nature and you're walking, or you do other forms of exercise from yoga to Pilates, and then the HIIT. But I think exercise, we know, boosts all the right neurotransmitters. There's no such thing as a bad workout. Even if it's 10 minutes, you're always going to leave that mat, that room, feeling better. So I think routine, and I think the other side of the day, getting to bed on time, not being that person staying up beyond midnight, really getting that sleep in, because then I think part of that routine is then you can rise, and then wherever you formulate that routine into exercise. And I think if you can get out into nature, even if you're right in the middle of a city, find that park, find that green space, because it is a reset. So yes, I think routine, exercise, and then we're going to get into the healthy eating, because we are what we eat.
I love that you said nature, because that's actually one of the things that I just feel. So every time I get outside and I have like that hit of fresh air, I see a tree. We're obviously lucky enough to be near the beach, but when I take my dog for a walk and I see the sea and I'm near the sand, it really does change my mood completely.
Yeah. And I think two things, sorry, just going to say on that, two things are really interesting what you said there. One is trees, and there's a wonderful Japanese study all about the power of trees. Yeah. So getting to forests, you can be that tree hugger if you want. You don't have to. That makes you feel crazy. But, you know, getting into that. But the other thing you say, it's interesting about the sea is not just obviously the sea itself and the pull and the tide, but it's actually horizon. And I think so many of us are desk-led now in our work and screens. There's a real thing about the eyes and exercising the eyes to put onto horizon. I think even within a city life, one can find that depth of field. So it's really interesting. So for you, of course, you've got that amazing horizon heading out to sea. And other of us, you know, whether it's a hill or, you know, there's always a horizon to seek. And I think it's that change in using the eyes and the eye muscles. It's also very important. It's all part of our reset.
That's so interesting. I had actually never thought about it that way. But when I do, thinking about its expansiveness. Yeah. In a way. And actually there's lots of studies that say if you are at a desk, that if you're staring at a computer, you should every 20 minutes look up, try to look out 20 meters away, maybe it's 20 yards for 20 seconds. So 20, 20, 20, just to rest your eyes.
And that movement, because again, it goes back to the routine, but sitting is the new smoking. It's a bit of a slogan around, you know, health practitioners. And, you know, a bit like your 20 minutes, or it's a 40-minute session or whatever it is, you know, get up that movement to get a glass of water. So our body loves to move. We all know, you know, if we think of ourselves, we are mainly water. It's a huge sweeping statement, but, and so if you just think of a stagnant sink or a, you know, puddle that's been sitting around, you know, you don't wish to be stagnant. We need to move, you know, and the lymphatics, we need to detox. So, and we do, we feel, and then there is that reset, particularly with the eyes. And if we're lucky enough to have a sunny day at this time of year, it's a real reset for the adrenal glands. And they come into play with our stress and our routines and our neurotransmitters, which we're going to talk about today.
Which we're going to talk about. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the healthy eating habits and how one can actually keep those healthy eating habits.
Yeah. Well, I think number one is, you know, is the shopping, the cupboards, you know, the fridge full. So of course it's really hard to maintain a habit if perhaps the whole family is not on board, or you're trying to do it in isolation. And yet if you go to a cupboard, out tumbles out all the things you'd rather be eating. So I think you have to get the groundwork first, which is, you know, fill your fridge with goodies. And I often talk about, you know, easy things, you know, so I know there's a lot of busy parents, you know, work, you know, everyone has this dialogue of being busy, but I think we can make it simple if we fill our fridge with nourishing fruits and vegetables, fill it with color. And, you know, okay, if you've washed your carrots before or bits of cucumber, you know, kind of grabbing these types of veggies, dipping them into hummus, if that's something you enjoy. You know, if you do want those kind of more biscuity things, looking at the slow releasing carbs. So looking, you know, anything to do with oats. And again, begin to be an ingredient reader. You know, if you don't understand the ingredients, or there's more than 3 or 4 ingredients on a packet, it's no longer food. So I think it's clean up the cupboards. You know, I think if this is a new beginning for you, perhaps, you know, I often say, go to your neighbor, go to your friend. Almost it's not really your friend because you're going to give them a whole load of processed stuff. And then sweep in with, you know, really focusing on plant-based vegetables and then your clean proteins. And really, if you're a little bit in doubt, think, you know, do you recognize it as a food? And if confused more, then really avoid those middle aisles in a supermarket. So I think the first part of a habit is clean up, you know, because it's really hard if your cupboard's full of chocolate and crisps and it's the one thing you don't want to eat. So have a clean up, and then again, get into blood sugar control, which I think we talked about last time, is just really balancing that meal. So then you're not in a roller coaster of blood sugar spiking and dipping, which can trigger blood sugar cravings. So it's getting the stabilizers on, but the first work is clean it up, you know, eat the
when you clean it up, do you have a list of Storeboard staples that people should have? Obviously you have the fruit and veg with the different colors, but then if you're looking at your Storeboard or your cupboard, are there certain things that should always be there?
Well, I think it's really useful. Things like, and we all would be better without canned food, but things like canned tomatoes, good quality coconut milk. So in a way, one can either make a curry or something tomato based. So you've got good baseline to chuck in a ton of veggies. And then I think upward from that, if you're not completely avoiding gluten, or, you can tolerate gluten, but you still want to go into the whole grain. So again, you're avoiding your blood sugar. So then I would be looking at things like whole wheat pasta, or the whole grain brown rice, maybe some noodles. I mean, I love buckwheat because it serves a purpose so hugely with magnesium, which will come up today with the brain. But so I think upwardly, you're kind of going, can I make a quick sauce? Can I chuck in some veggies or some tomato puree, possibly another one? And then go up into things that, like the whole grain. So what we really want to avoid is the very refined, processed, flour-based, pasta noodles, because they serve no purpose. They're a good filler, but they're empty. There's no nutrition in that. So, but I love buckwheat, and then go into the beans and pulses. They're fantastic. Again, if you're, doing something with lamb or chicken, a chickpea will often, or some lentils. So I think the plant-based beans pulses is a good staple, or a can of chickpeas, and then something that you can build on either in a curry or Italian way.
Yeah, and you mentioned,
if herbs go in that cupboard, I'd get lots of different herbs as well.
And you mentioned cans. So just to note, like, you can find BPA-free cans, because that's one of the things.
Yeah, it's a big difference. Yeah, I know. And the aluminium and the BPA, like you say. So
you just find the right brands.
You find the right brand. Yeah. But I think it's, again, we were going to the store cupboard. So, hopefully not necessarily using that more than once a week, or you do like a big, I'm all into batch cooking in these busy lives. We want to use and create a gorgeous casserole or curries and batch cook. So yes, ideally not, but if we were just looking at the store cupboard moment, I would definitely go into, spices, herbs, and then some good quality whole grains, rice, and then things like,
okay, great.
Possibly the BPA stuff.
Okay, so we're going to clean up our fridge, clean up the
fridge, and make it kind, So again, I'm a big one about having things in glass. Again, moving away from the plastics, the toxic burden, particularly for our men, male and female. We're seeing men become more estrogenic, so it is for both men and women. So I love a glass jar, and I love, so you can have all your little raw nuts, you could do your seeds. Because I think everything, if it looks more attractive, even popping your orange lentils into a glass jar, kind of like, oh, okay, little lentil and coconut milk. So glass jars, particularly for nuts and seeds. And then, like you say, the fridge full of the color. But we also need that protein, as we mentioned, for blood sugar. So things like lentil or hummus dips, some form of easy protein, or some delicious, if you're in Portugal, some of those lovely air-dried hams, which are nitrate-free, hopefully, but little bits of protein.
And you mentioned clean protein. What's that?
So that's a good question. So when I say clean protein, again, we're moving away from anything manufactured, or I'm not a fan of the QUORN corn, what is that when we're coming to a kind of hydrolyzed soy or something created in back. So I think, again, the analogy falling from a tree or coming from our land, for those who are eating meat and fish, that's much easier. And, obviously, we're looking towards fish being line caught, but particularly with our meats being hormone free and grass fed. So again, reared as nature intended.